And I'm so grateful that Chris Smith is a member of the United States Congress and has been because of his leadership, because of his enormous heart, his enormous caring. And it is amazing, those of us who believe in God, the way our lives develop. I was a guy that grew up, I never liked to hug anybody. But when we had three beautiful, incredible girls added to my wife's and my life, I became a hugger. Fox has a show Outnumbered, but that's kind of been my life for years now. And I know there's so many people that say, you're a man, you have no right to speak about this. I guess when I was a judge, there were those who thought, since I was not a person that had been on both sides of a civil lawsuit or had been a defendant in a case, maybe I should not be able to say anything about or pass sentence. But we have laws, and laws are there to protect people. And I do believe, as our founders did, in nature's God, that we have a creator who provided us inalienable rights. But in this world, you have to fight for any inheritance, including your inalienable rights. And it does appear that nature gave a greater percentage of women a nurturing, greater sense of loving and caring than most men. That gets changed for some of us when you have a house full of girls. But I could identify with the gentleman, a doctor who had performed, I think he said over 1,000 abortions, who came before our Judiciary Committee and testified about how it was just a procedure. It was nothing to him, and how he would go in to the uterus, and of course the pregnant mom was not dilated and not going to be able to deliver a baby that had begun forming, had a heartbeat. But that's why he would go in with his instrument, feel around with his clamps for something that felt long, and when he found it, he knew that was either a leg, an arm, and he would grab it and pull it out from the baby's body, and continued until he did that 4 times, and then reach in and find something that felt bulbous, and he knew the head could not come out in a bulbous form, and so he would crush it and pull out the baby's head. And that was the way he went about beginning the abortion of a child that had begun developing like that, and that he never thought a thing about it until his daughter died. And then he became nauseated. He was never able to do another abortion like that, and it became such a burden that he had done what he had done. I know from my years on the bench as a judge, I know from my years as an attorney helping people, if something is built on a lie, the chances are that the outcome will not be good for a majority of people. And I also know that if someone encourages and perpetuates a lie within some other person's life, they are not that person's friend. So I would like to quickly reference an article published by WND called The Real Jane Roe, and just hit some of the highlights about the real Jane Roe. The woman, I was talking with my friend Chris Smith about Norma McCorvey. He's quite familiar with her, and I believe he said he had talked to her. Yes, he talked to her and had come to know her. Being the Christian that Chris Smith is, he cares deeply about people, and that included Norma McCorvey. But this article says at the age of 21, McCorvey was pregnant with her third child. She'd given her other two children up for adoption, and McCorvey did not want to say goodbye to her offspring a third time. So she decided to have an illegal abortion, but the Dallas clinic she went to had been recently raided and shut down. So McCorvey made up a story. She had been raped. She told her doctor and two lawyers. She signed an affidavit on condition and anonymity, and the lawsuit began. And she told WorldNet Daily, I considered abortion, and because of this, I was put in touch with two attorneys, Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey. They had just recently graduated from law school and were interested in challenging the Texas abortion statute. She says, plain and simple, I was used. This is Norma McCorvey. I was a nobody to them. They only needed a pregnant woman to use for their case, and that's it. They cared not about me, but only about legalizing abortion. Even after the case, I was never respected, probably because I was not an Ivy League educated liberal feminist like they were. But she goes on and says, well, this was from a New York Times interview. McCorvey describes her meeting the two young attorneys. Sarah Weddington sat right across the table from me at Columbo's Pizza Parlor, and I didn't know then that she had had an abortion herself. When I told her then how desperately I needed one, she could have told me where to go for it, but she didn't. She wouldn't, because she needed me to be pregnant for her case. I set Sarah Weddington up on a pedestal like a rose petal, but when it came to my turn, well, Sarah saw these cuts on my wrists, my swollen eyes from crying, the miserable person sitting across from her, and she knew she had a patsy. She knew I wouldn't go outside of the realm of her and Linda. I was too scared. It was one of the most hideous times of my life. She says, my experience with pro-abortion leaders is that they are snobs. They claim they care about women and their rights, but in my experience, they care for nothing, not even themselves in a way, McCorvey said. McCorvey said in a 1990 New York Times interview that the rape lie caused her to be terribly depressed. I was brought up not to lie, and because of this story, I had to lie all the time. And the depression periods got deeper and longer until the night I cut my wrists. Well, so it's one of the difficulties that attorneys have when you represent someone and you're sworn to do the best job you can. It should be more than simply about getting the legal result that a lawyer wants. It ought to be about helping the client. You can't always do that, but it is rather tragic that Jane Roe, Norma McCorvey, now looks back on that as the most hideous time of her life, and that she was taken advantage of by people that didn't care about her. They had an agenda. And I heard someone here on the floor talking about the Women's March and how that was for all women, except the hypocrisy of that march was it was not about all women, because there were pro-life women that tried to march. It was about women that think exactly like we do, and nobody else gets to participate. It's the same kind of mentality that would when in the majority here in this body, say we want everybody to participate in debate, except we're going to have a record-setting number of closed rules so nobody can debate. We don't want your input on Obamacare. We don't care that you support what we do on pre-existing conditions and on kids living with their parents. Heck, some of us said 30 would be a better number than 26. They didn't care. They could pass it without our votes. They didn't want our input. And so then to hear people who treated us like that say we care about open debate, knowing that some of those same people came down here and grabbed microphones and for the first time we can find in congressional hearing, prevented the majority from starting into session. And then they want to lecture us on openness and kindness and open debate? Really? Let's go back to the Norma McCorveys of the world. Let's minister to them individually, as my church, as a number of ministries with which I'm greatly familiar do. Let's help the real person. Let's help that child so that that little boy or that little girl doesn't have its arms and legs jerked out of the uterus. Let's help that child have a life that will be so full they'll never think about slitting their wrists as Norma McCorvey did. Let's vote for life.